So it's cool.
Right.
So again, because we are recording, feel free to be on camera, off camera. We're not going to share this publicly, I don't think at all. Just with internally for people doing this work. And Joanne, I can't really follow the chat that well while I've got the slide deck up. So I'll pause, or if you just want to shout out or
I will.
anything comes up. I think that I think the content is timed right to still give us time at the end for questions, but certainly if things come up, you know, share as you like. I want this to be useful for you. I'm really excited and passionate about this work, and just grateful to get the opportunity to talk to you about sort of early childhood and creating trauma-informed environments in early childhood. My name is Amy Ebbison. I'm a clinical social worker with a focus on trauma, and really have come to that in my sort of 30 plus year social work career, because that feels to me like what is the source of so much mental illness, hardship, grief, pain. That's where I feel like the most useful place to focus really is. And I put this little picture here because I think it does tell the importance of this. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care, right? This work that we're all doing is about, this is heart work. This is caring work. This is, and that's why it's important. And that's also why it makes me so sad that it has been undervalued in our culture. So what I'm hoping happens in the next hour, and again, if everybody could mute themselves for now, that would be great, just to eliminate background noise. So what I'm hoping for the next hour and a half is that you see what I see, because of what I've learned, that early childhood is incredibly important for adult outcomes. Most important thing for happiness later in life. This is really important work that you're doing. And recognize or appreciate that the environment that we're growing up in is also a teacher. We're kind of showing up as our, teachers. We're teachers, but they're learning from things going on around them that aren't just us. And that's sort of this idea of trauma-informed environments, making sure that we recognize the environment's a teacher, and control the environment in the right ways to enhance that. Also, as I was saying, as people were coming in, to recognize that trauma is the root cause of distress throughout our whole lives. We're faced with so many sort of psychological challenges as young people, as adults, and for the most part, none of us have been taught how to deal with that, or how to do a good job of that, or even to value that. And because of it, we kind of stay in distress. So the more we see that trauma is what's going on, at least for me, it has allowed me to have more kindness and empathy, and not just for people I'm with, but for myself as well. We're people too, and we deserve all the kindness and all the love and all the understanding. And just like the little people in your care, many of us didn't have an environment that completely supported our healthy, happy, safe development. So I'd like to do a quick activity, and it's like raise your hand. And I think because I have this screen share going on, you should have in your toolbar here a way to raise your hand virtually, like it says raise hand. So if we can do that, that's great. If you'd like to just raise your physical hand, that's great too. Whatever works for you is fine with me. And this is just to start our thinking about this topic as it relates to us. And so I'm going to go through these things quickly, and we'll just ask for, people to raise their hands if it applies to them. Maybe notice how many people have their hand raised. And then we'll talk about it on the other side. So raise your hand if you have addiction in your family. Okay, you can put them down. Next, raise your hand if you have gone through a personal crisis. Many of us, lots of hands going up.
Oh.
You can put them down. Ready for the next one? Raise your hand if you've ever lost control of your emotions. Yep, lots of us. Okay, thank you. You can put them down. The next one and the last one, raise your hand if you know someone who died by suicide. Yeah, quite a lot there as well. Wow. All right, I'm gonna stop the share for a second and just kind of, you can put your hands down, but I would love to hear from people, if you don't mind sharing, what that was like, or like what came up, or what did you notice? What struck you? And you can just unmute and jump right on it.
Amy, I think for me, this is Joanne. It was my cousin, and my cousins live across the country. But I know how it affected them based on what they've expressed to me. And two of my cousins found my cousin, their brother, and he had shot himself. And I just see the pain when they talk about him, and the questions, why did you do this? We're here for you. So it was just that, like, why did this happen?
And it's so, and we're going to talk about, sort of physical health versus mental health, but like, I asked that question to show like this stuff is just as important as physical. This stuff will lead to death, and not a peaceful death, right? Not attending to mental health is so problematic. It's so problematic, and that's why this is such an important topic. And yeah, that was it's heavy, and I appreciate your willingness to sort of go there with the heavy, because our avoiding this stuff because it's heavy isn't working. Like we have to kind of do this. Just look at the painful stuff, because that's what's really going to help the kids. Like that's what's going to help us too. The healthier we are, the better we are for the kids. I can 100% trace like how I was doing to how I was parenting, right? Like I can think about some things that I did as a parent that I'm like completely mortified about, and like I wasn't doing good when I was doing that. Like that wasn't about my kid, that was about me. I can't lie. So I just say too, I come to this humble, and the recognition that I harmed myself and others by not learning this, like by not knowing this, not understanding this, not going there. So it really is brave of all of you to even just be here and to be in this space. And big stuff comes up right out of the gate with this. And because we don't talk about all this, it gives it that extra, like the stigma piece. Did anybody else want to say anything or share anything about what they noticed or what came up for them before I dive in to more slides? All right. Hearing nothing, I will go back to the slides. And again, thank you all so much for participating in that. It's important. Oh, look, I had more. But that's all. It's all good. One of the things that does come up when we talk about this is this idea of stigma, right? We think about mental health very differently than we think about physical health as a culture, despite the fact that it really isn't that different. I have this cartoon here that I love to show because I feel like it just really sends the message that needs to be sent about physical illness and mental illness. This cartoon you can see is the same picture at the top and at the bottom. At the top, it's labeled physical illness. And the guy who's lying on the ground says, I feel like I'm dying. And his helper says, we need to get you to the hospital as soon as possible. In the bottom frame, we have the exact same picture, exact same scenario. However, it's labeled mental illness. The guy says, I feel like I'm dying. He's lying on the ground. And the helper says, just try and remember, a lot of people have it a lot worse. Many of us have heard that. That's the message that's pretty loud and clear in our culture. Yet, as we just saw, is not the truth. Mental illness can lead to death just as quickly as physical illness. The definition of stigma is a mark of disgrace or infamy, a stain or reproach as on one's reputation. Stigma is a barrier that discourages individuals and their families from seeking help. We know that people are judgmental in our culture about this. That's wrong, that's harmful, but we know it's the truth, so we don't say anything about what we're going through or about what's going on. Or we do say something and we're met with a lot of people have it a lot worse. And then we just kind of learn, yeah, nobody's going to be able to help with this. So stigma is really not serving us. Many people would rather tell their employer they served time in jail than admit to being in a psychiatric hospital. We would never shame you if you had your appendix burst and you were in the hospital. Yet you would feel shame if you had something that put you in the hospital for your mental health. That's wrong, but that is the world we live in. It doesn't even surprise me that people would rather tell their employer they served time in jail. But that should be upsetting to us. An estimated 44 million Americans experience a mental disorder in any given year. So just some numbers behind this isn't serving us. And I need to update my stat because I think this is a pre-COVID number. I would think that things are much higher even. I know people who never experienced symptoms of mental illness and distress did during COVID. So I imagine it's even more so. So it's way past time to deal with this stuff. The other thing that this means about this content, because we know there's all this heaviness on it, there's judgment, that talking about this content can be hard and triggering and upsetting. And we know that, and we and anticipate even that stuff might come up for you as we talk about this, because we all live in this world where our feelings weren't anything. They were treated like they didn't matter. We were all children. We know the powerlessness of that. And that's painful. We've been harmed. Another important thing to really acknowledge as we talk about this is burden isn't distributed equally in amongst the world. Your identity matters. The identity group that you belong to is going to impact how much stigma is put on you, how much stigma you put on yourself, your baseline stress, and what you see around you, your available choices, right? And that means all of these different identity groups. We all have an identity around race, around gender, around our sexuality or sexual orientation, abilities and disabilities, where we're from, what language we speak. All of these things that make up who we are have meaning in the world. They're not just benign. Isn't, pink and yellow, both beautiful colors. We give different power levels to these groups is part of what's going on. So it's important to be aware of that. Whatever group you're in, again, is going to impact how things play out for you. The personal experiences you've had in your childhood really matter. We're all bringing ourselves to this work for better and for worse, mostly for better, but we're bringing ourselves and all of the things we've learned and been through and seen from birth to now. Cultural beliefs can vary a lot. Cultural beliefs about how families treat each other, what family means, what mental health means, all of those things come to play. And as I said, we don't give everybody equal power in this culture. We know that there is racism, there is sexism, there's heterosexism, all kinds of oppression in this world. I think that this is such a manifestation of sexism that this whole field of taking care of and things to do with feelings like is undervalued, underpaid, not recognized. That to me is about power and oppression and sexism. The other thing that's also important to recognize is people have positional power. There are people here in the Zoom room that are the boss of other people in the Zoom room. And that means that they have a different level of freedom to speak their mind than someone else might. And all of those things matter. For us, when we think about the kids and the parents, like this is their life. Like if we're saying, you got to get it together, or we're going to contact DCF, like that is going to have a huge impact on their life. And not that it doesn't impact you, but this is your job, not your life. So recognizing that you have power, even if you don't feel like you do. All right, all of that pre-work out of the way, hopefully. And here we are at the definition of trauma. We've kind of been talking about it a bunch without really defining it. But here we go. And this is the definition that the American Psychiatric Association, who's kind of responsible for all of the diagnostic criteria, all things mental illness really falls under them. This is the definition they had in '87, and they haven't changed it since then. And I think it's a good one. Psychological trauma is an occurrence which is outside the scope of everyday human experience and which would be notably distressing to almost anyone. So something that doesn't happen every day, or if it does, we know if you're living in a war zone, something horrifying might be happening every day, but notably distressing to anyone. Trauma. When you're in trauma, it engages your body's innate, natural, designed to protect you, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, stress response. You get, sometimes I think about it like I can feel my blood boiling almost, like I can feel myself heating up. And that's the truth about it. Like it's physiological, it's in your mind, it's in your body, it's real. when the traumatic occurrence or experience causes the body and mind to be overwhelmed and results in nervous system dysregulation. Meaning like you just can't control it. Like the tears are coming and you can't help it. You're yelling and you can't calm yourself down. Like that's, you're in a trauma response. It's not the event itself that determines whether it was a trauma, but the person's individual experience of the event. And that's just a really important thing to know, that every individual experiences things really differently. I've worked with kids in the same family. I work with twins who've been through a lot of the same things, but they interpret the things they've been through really differently. And sometimes the person says, well, that was, not a big thing. And the sibling is like, that was a hugely horrible thing. So just, I use that piece of information to just like, when people tell me something was traumatizing, or when I can see it, like, I believe people. I don't have any need to investigate, was this really that bad? The damage can come from a single one-time event. Some horrible thing happens, or more often, for kids at least, it's things that are happening again and again and again that like kind of keep going and keep repeating. People could mute, or Joanne, you could probably you can mute.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Sweet. Trauma is common. This stuff really has happened to so many of us. And I'm going to talk the ACE study. I'm sure you've all, like, people have all heard the ACE study by now. At least there's that. It's so funny to me because I have had some audiences that haven't heard of the ACE study, and I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, whoa. Because I know for people in early childhood environments, you hear about it all the time. But right, what that ACE study showed us, physical health and mental health, same thing. You are going to meet an early death when you've had these horrible things in the realm of mental health. So from these studies, according to the CDC, over half of Americans have at least one traumatic event, something that happened to them before age 18 that we know would be distressing to anyone. So any form of abuse, any form of neglect, and then some household dysfunction, indicators like someone in jail, addiction, seeing your mother treated violently. That's a Bessel van der Kolk, not CDC. Mental illness, divorce, all of those things are considered a trauma. And these things pile, right? We add these numbers together. So whatever that score is, the more likely you're going to have physical impact that robs years of your life. Just as recently as 2019, I'm embarrassed to say, but I mean, I guess it's good we moved. The American Academy of Pediatrics said that racism needs to be on the list and poverty needs to be on the list. So if you're a person of color, you're starting the world with an ACE score of 1, which I know everyone here who considers himself a person of color knows that, but wow, crap world we're bringing kids into. Sorry. Trauma impacts health. These charts are right off of the ACE study. And so we know that when we're having these bad things happen to us, and we're not getting to sort of deal with them or talk about them or kind of let them go, it impacts our memory. It impacts our concentration, our ability to learn new things, our ability to focus. We know from the ACE study, it's correlated with heart disease, obesity, addiction, pulmonary illness, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, cancer. All the causes of death correlate. Some of the more harmful life outcome problems with trauma trauma impacts an individual's ability to trust people, to cope with hard things, and to form healthy relationships. Hugely important. And this is one of the places that we are directly impacting as early childhood educators. And we'll talk more about that. But this is the work we're really doing. You guys are really doing it. Another challenge from trauma, it disrupts your ability to even identify your emotions. You don't even know, your feelings are flooding you. It's really hard to calm yourself down, and to control how you're expressing your emotions. Another really damaging thing from trauma is that people who've experienced trauma have a hard time knowing what is safe and what is unsafe. That's part of why people find themselves in bad situations, because they don't know anything else. Another really harmful impact of trauma that you can undo in early childhood settings is that trauma shapes a person's belief about themselves and about other people. It impacts their ability to have hope and their whole outlook on life. One of the major symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder is, foreshortened, you don't believe you have a future. We don't want that for our kids. And we can also see that the more of these bad things, the more traumas stack up, the more likely you are to engage in behaviors that aren't really healthy to soothe yourself. And then that adds to that cycle of more and more health problems. It's just, again, so much better to not get in that sort of struggle spot to begin with, than and build them strong from the beginning. Trauma affects our behavior. This story I got from Stephen Covey. He's, like a success guru. He has all these planners and all this great stuff, but he talks about highly effective people. This story just stayed with me. And I think it's so good for illustrating. He was in the subway and this guy gets on with his two sons, and these boys are like running around, like running up and down in the cars, like messing with people, just really kind of bothering people. And they just kind of keep doing it. The dad's not doing anything. So Stephen finally gets irritated enough to say to the dad, like, why don't you do something to control your kids? The father replies, we just got back from the hospital where their mother died. I don't know how to handle it, and I guess they don't either. I've read that like 100 times, and it gets me pretty much every time to that recognition of how I would have how I was right there with them judging those two kids and that family until I knew what they were going through. And then that, unless you're a sociopath, and I hope you're not, that pretty quickly probably shifted you into feeling so sad and wanting to hug those kids, not yell at them. That's what's going on with kids in our classrooms. They are struggling. They are not trying to mess with us. Here is the reason, and I know you've probably heard so much about brain development, but this is the meat. This is the why. What is happening in your classrooms and your environments is building the brains of all of these humans. This is going to impact them for the rest of their life. And I have this picture here because this is what really helped me be able to understand this, right? The brain is like a bunch of pathways, and they even call them like neural pathways. We start out, that top picture is like a kid path, right? Like if I'm cutting through the woods to see my friend, it's going to look like that if I use it a bunch. And then the more use it gets, like you get like a paved road. And if you really use it all the time, it's like a superhighway, and then even a bigger superhighway. That is how your brain is getting set up. And it's getting set up in these first years of life. The first 7 years of life are the most dramatic time of brain growth ever. And the brain is mind-blowing because how it's what we call a use-dependent organ. It sets itself up based on what it's going to need to know how to do. Wow. So like if you are born into, no matter what your ethnic background, if you are born into a family that speaks English, you are going to learn to speak English. Your brain is like, what do I need to learn? That's what I need to learn. So whatever whatever's going on around you is what your brain is building itself around. Every experience you have is shaping this architecture of the brain, like the whole street systems. When there's a lot of feeling, a lot of emotion, it supercharges the pathway. Like it goes right from kid path to superhighway, right? It really has more power when there's emotional power. The more an experience happens, the better traveled the path is. So if this same thing goes again and again, then that becomes the structure of this kid's brain. So kids that are really spending their time really mad or really sad are building really mad brains and really sad brains. That is going to become their default. That's going to become their main road, which is why it's so, so important and such a gift to be able to have influence on them in this time. The brain is being created right now. They're creating this stuff and it's setting the blueprint for everything in their life. And whenever, like emotion, using multiple senses supercharges it. So when they're doing music activities, when they're doing art activities, that is like even more powerful. That's why we're excited about art therapy, music therapy. If what's happening in childhood is abuse, then that becomes that child's default. That child abuse feels like the road they're on for them, and then that feels expected and normal in adulthood. Like this is part of why people pick unsafe partners. If you had unsafe parents, you don't know any better. You don't, like, all you know is what feels normal to you. And for many of the kids, they might be in households with adults that are really struggling. But if they have adults like you that are calm and caring and have control over things in a way that doesn't involve scaring or using fear, then they know that that's possible. And then they're building those pathways and those roads. They're seeing different ways for things to be. When we're adults, like we can, like I personally, I experienced abuse and neglect as a child, right? And I thought like, I'll just learn about it and I'll be really expert in it. And then that'll somehow give me immunity from being impacted by it. Nope, that didn't happen. Of course I'm impacted by it, right? And I've worked hard to like sort of learn new things and do things differently. But when things get bad, I'm back on my default, right? And that is not like the scenic route is I'd much rather be taking the scenic route. That's not what happened, right? The more we're helping kids right now build happy street and calm avenue in their brain, we are serving them for the rest of their lives. We're serving their future partners. This is like how we make the world better and why this is so, so important. When children are in crisis, they feel shameful, they feel bad, they feel broken. A lot of times you probably are seeing kids that are actively in fight, flight, freeze. That sort of whole thing about that system was set up to keep us safe and run away from the bear. But what if you live with the bear? Like you never get to calm down, or if your environments are places where kids can armor off and relax, that goes so far, so far. A lot of times kids have been taught by bad experiences with adults that they can't trust people. And whenever you are trustworthy, you're undoing that harm. And this is the foundational time. So this is when we want to really undo any harm. This is when we really want them to have good experiences. Kids that are in crisis don't have confidence in themselves at all. They're overwhelmed. They're very easy. It's very easy for people to keep on harming them because they're not speaking up for themselves. They don't have that. How can they? And children in crisis, what they need more than anything else is kindness, to be seen, to feel cared about. You've probably heard this quote a bunch too, and I'm glad because it's a really good one. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower, right? We don't dig it up like, what's wrong with you, flower? We're like, oh no, you need more water. Oh no, you're not getting enough light. We don't go like, stupid flower. But we do that to people, and that's not right. What we are saving kids from is post-traumatic stress disorder later in life. And that's part of why it's taken us so long as a culture to understand and get how important early childhood is because when kids are harmed in early childhood, the harm doesn't always show up right away. A lot of times it shows up much later, right? For many people, when it shows up is when they're trying to have adult relationships, when they're falling in love, when they're choosing partners, when they're adulting, they're trying to hold down jobs. That's when they realize, wow, like that's when this stuff hits. So this is kind of what we're saving people from if we can. The things that we learn to do to cope during trauma and crisis, we learn those for a reason. Those keep us safe. That's keeps us calm. We learn whatever we can do. But the problem is that those same things keep us from good things too. They're not effective when the trauma goes away, but we still are doing that. So things like guilt, shame, blaming yourself, withdrawing from people, just being stressed out at baseline, those are all things that we're up against if we don't get this love, kind, nurture, support, enrichment in early childhood. The very first early childhood setting I was in, this poster was on the wall, and it really set a tone for me. It was my very first job, and this was in our break room, and I love it because it made sense to me. Children learn what they live. If a child lives with criticism, he'll learn to condemn. If a child lives with hostility, he learns to fight. If a child lives with ridicule, he learns to be shy. If a child lives with shame, he learns to feel guilty. If a child lives with tolerance, he learns to be patient. If a child lives with encouragement, he learns confidence. If a child lives with praise, he learns to appreciate. If a child lives with fairness, he learns justice. If a child lives with security, he learns to have faith. It kind of has been alluded to, but shame is like the unintended cereal box prize. Every trauma comes with unearned shame. And that's why it has to be addressed and treated. If it's just left there, it's so detrimental. But this happens regardless. I have worked with really like toddler age kids that were abused, that were sexually abused, that were physically abused. And these little boos think that they did something wrong. They blame themselves. They have this, like, so that's just our default, to blame ourselves. Like, if wow, right? Like you can, it's so easy to see, like, you're a kid, you cannot control adults. Side note, I always try to say that whenever I can, whenever I have an opportunity, to remind kids that they cannot control adults. Remind adults, kids cannot control adults. That's just the way it is. Yet we don't recognize that when we're kids, and we blame ourselves for not being in better control of the adults around us. So if we have experienced any sort of abuse or neglect, we have the shame secret cereal box prize. And Brene Brown, who is she's the social work goddess. You probably have heard of her by now. She has TED Talks, she has books, but she considers herself a shame researcher. And she really kind of came to this, as I did, from seeing what was going on for people. And so she calls herself a shame researcher. And her definition is an intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we're flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Children, it's just safer for children to blame themselves than to blame the adults in their life. If you believe that the adults in your life had no ability to control themselves or had no ability to keep you safe, that is terrifying. How do you live with that's harder to live with. If you decide, like, oh, it must be I must be doing something wrong, like, that feels a little bit more in your control. But boy, is that so harmful. And that's what's going on for kids. Shame turned in can look like needing everything to be perfect, feeling like you're bad, you deserve punishment, you're not lovable. Sometimes that shame feeling can be like this emotional hot potato that's so intensely painful that quickly people turn it out and they yell, they're violent, rage, same thing, just a different expression of it. And the antidote, the answer to that, according to Brene, is connection and relationship. And she defines it as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. That's the magic that you can offer kids and you can offer each other. It doesn't cost anything, and it's like, it's beautiful. That's the work right there. Shame, one of the things that Brene found out about shame is so often it's the root cause of addiction. And that's honestly, at the very end, you'll get a link or QR code to give a little feedback to the supporter of this work. And the Department of Public Health supports this helping people understand childhood trauma as prevention of addiction work, right? We now recognize that people who are struggling with addiction are doing it because they're trying to cope with trauma. They want to make themselves feel better. The way things are in our culture now, if you're in distress, if you're not doing good, we say, go see a therapist. And if you could ever get to see a therapist, he or she, usually she, will probably say, give me a few months in therapy. It's going to be 2 or 3 months. We'll learn some new coping skills. We'll talk things through and you'll begin to feel better. Well, great. That sounds good. But 2 to 3 months, really? All right, well, go here. You can go see the psychiatrist. And if you go to the psychiatrist, he's going to pull out his prescription pad, as they are wont to do, and he's going to say, give this medication 2 or 3 weeks and you'll start to feel better. Okay, great. Thanks. Better than 2 or 3 months. But if you go to the bar on the corner, the bartender says, give this shot 2 or 3 minutes and you'll be feeling better. I don't know about you. I'm going with 2 to 3 minutes. Right? That is why addiction starts. That is where addiction's from. So what we can do is continue to build resilience for the kids, for ourselves. And one of the things that also has been helpful for me to know, in public health, they use this model here. I've got the scale of risk factors and protective factors. All the things that I've been talking about, that we've been talking about, shame, abuse, trauma, all those things are risk factors. We know that if those are present, we're more likely to have bad outcomes. Kids are more likely to have bad outcomes, right? The problem is we can't really do too much about that a lot of the times. We don't have control over what's going on in children's houses, or we don't have control over what their parents are like, what the country they were born into is experiencing for distress. There's so much impacting them we don't have control over. So in public health, we say, well, there's things on the other side of that. There's things that make it easier for people to cope. There's things that make it more likely that people can face bad things and not have it wreck their whole life, that they'll be able to come back, that they'll be able to move forward. That's what we call the protective factors. That's what you guys are. You're the protective factors. All right, I gotta take one quick break here for a second. I gotta let the dog. All right, bought myself a minute there. Let's hope. Thanks. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Amy.
So the things that we're doing that are going to help us and kids, anything that keeps the stress level down, decrease their stress. We've probably all seen and heard the sort of hierarchy of needs pyramid here. If you like, hangry is real, right? Like if you haven't eaten, it's hard to like put on a happy face. If you haven't gotten enough sleep, you're not going to be able to have good control of your emotions. I know that for me, like something that on a day I'm well rested is like could be like I'm a puddle if I haven't had enough sleep, right? So that's like we see that in the kids all the time. We're just the same. We pretend we're not, but making sure that they have the basic needs met as best they can. And I know all of the centers really do a good job with that. Structure and routine make kids feel safe. Things being predictable is what's safe. I know I'm doing a good job when people say to them, I can say, you know what I'm going to say, right? And they do know what I'm going to say. They know what I'm going to say. I say the same things all the time. Right? I try to be predictable, consistent, because that is what helps people feel safe in relationship with you. I know you're learning all about mindfulness, and so are the kids. But what that really means is like just there's a lot of, sort of pop psychology that talks about depression is when our thoughts are like we're in the past, we're in things that happened, remorse, regret, the bad stuff. And anxiety is when we're in the future, like this bad thing's going to happen. I didn't do this thing, this bad, right? So mindfulness is like just right now. And I have had to really, for myself with anxiety, like I've had to develop like nothing bad is happening right now. Like I have to tell myself that, but that really, it helps me because nothing bad is happening right now. So often, when our mind creates our world, and if I'm in a bad place in my mind, it can feel like like I'm in a bad place literally, but that's not the case. I'm safe. I'm an adult. I'm a grown-up now. Everything's okay. My dog might annoy us, but that's the really worst thing that's going to happen right now. So my anxiety, I can be in this moment. When people have had trauma, they feel they're hyper vigilant. They feel like everything's like the bad thing is going to happen at any moment. They're on edge. When you can reduce their sense of danger, that's really helping. And just recognizing that might be what's going on. A lot of kids might feel like they're always in danger. They're just not sure. But when they feel cared about, it's magic. I still remember like times when I was a tiny and people were just nice, like they called me honey, or they were nice to me, right? And school was where I got that. Like that wasn't happening in my home, but like that got me really far. Like it made a big difference to have that. And I know that there's so many kids and so many people will say the same thing. Having a teacher that like if you watch Goalcast or those YouTube things, every single person who made it has like a champion, like, and a lot of times it's a teacher or a childcare person, like somebody who was in a space with them when they were young that really cared about them. It's magic. Other things, so this is from the SAHAMSA, Mental Health and Substance Abuse Administration, and they're pretty much, most sort of organizations' ways of thinking are in agreement that these are the pieces to think about in the environment that contribute to it being a trauma-informed environment. And again, I have this picture to remind me, like, that's what we want for the kids. These kids have to sort of put on armor to be in the world, right? This world is really hard to be in. It's hard for me. I'm a grown up. It's probably hard for a lot of you too. So just imagine what it's like for these littles. So when they get to take their armor off and just be kids, whew, that is magic. That is really filling their cup, building that resilience. And to be that place for them, safety. Number one thing, nobody's hurting them. Nobody's making them feel scared to get them into control. They feel safe. They feel like nothing. And sometimes it's from other kids too. Like this is on a slide, doesn't mean it's easy, doesn't mean it's not work, doesn't mean it's like, oh, okay, oh, now I'll do that. It can be hard, but knowing that, kids need to feel safe, and they feel safest when they know what's coming next, when they know the adults will jump in if they need to, when they know that the adults care, are paying attention, they feel safe. Trustworthiness and transparency, that is back on that sort of, you know what I'm going to say, because I say the same things. Like when you change the rules up a lot, that's really destabilizing for kids. Like when it's fun, when something doesn't matter one day, but then the next day it's a super big problem, like kids feel like they don't know what to do with that. So the more that they can trust that things are going to be predictable, they trust you, they're told about what's going, because I said so was like probably the biggest default for all of our parents. And we know when we heard it like that, no, that's like, of course you can say because I said so. And there's times when you just have to take control of the situation, but that's not most of the times. And when you are just taking control of the situation with a because I said so, or however that looks, that's teaching the kid that they can't do it themselves. That's disempowering for kids. That's you taking, and that was my title at one of these jobs, was behavior manager. And that's what I had to do, was deal with the big behaviors and to keep people safe. But we want the kids to keep themselves safe. Like that's what we're striving for. Sometimes you really do have to step in. But if you do it too much, you're squishing them. Like they're not going to develop it themselves. Peer support is another great piece of trauma-informed environments, meaning encourage kids supporting kids, encourage teachers supporting teachers, like give that, I remember people telling me kind of ways that they really saw kids show up for other kids. And it was beautiful. And, they amplified it by pointing it out and talking about it and complimenting the kid for doing. I love that you shared your snack with Sally. You saw that Sally was so sad because her snack dropped on the ground and you shared your snack with her. That is beautiful. Like that kid's going to walk tall, and that's what we want. We want the kids to feel like not only can they count on the teachers to keep them safe and care about them, some of these kids are really their friends and really care. That's beautiful. And kind of further extension of that, collaboration and mutuality is like peer support. When it's not my way or the highway, it's what are we coming up with together? What is a good rule for this? How could we work? How about Billy's not being included? Can we bring Billy? What would help you feel like you could participate? We want kids to have feel empowered. We want them to feel like they can do it. They can be, they're going to be okay. They have the skills. When they think that when they know that adults love them and think that they're great, like they can achieve incredible things. Like it really is our belief in them that's magic. You really can't quantify how powerful that is. It's always also important to consider that kids are all coming from different cultures, gender norms, history, like whatever's going on in their family, we have to sort of have some recognition and support of that. We don't ever want to go against a kid going sort of, oh, well, maybe you do that in your family, but we're not doing that here, is not in service of, it's in service of the kid to see other ways of doing things. But if the kid feels like their way of doing things is put down or less than, that's going to create inner conflict or family conflict, which isn't going to help the kid. That's probably going to make things worse for the kid. So even if you feel that and know that, even if you know, like, wow, I would never do things the way that that kid's family is doing it, like, we want to be respectful. Even if we know that it's not the best, that kid has what that kid has, and it's who they are. If you're putting down anything about their lives, they're going to feel put down, and we don't want that. We want them to feel loved. The healthy relationship, your helping relationship, is really the magic. Again, it is a protective factor. It can lessen and even undo the effects of trauma. You giving that kid unconditional positive regard, that's a big therapy term, but that is kind of what it is. If you are hearing from somebody that they care about you, even when you make really bad choices, or they still care about you, they want you to do better, that makes it better. If somebody's judging me and looking down on me, then my walls are going to go right up. But if I'm like, this person cares about me, even though I messed this up terribly, they're still my friend. They still care about me. Like, I'm going to want to do better. I am going to do better because of that. So that's what builds resilience. That offers role models. That encourages healing. It's more effective than anything else. This Bruce Perry quote, I feel like is so what you're in right now. The more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely they will be able to recover from trauma and thrive. Relationships are the agents of change, and the most powerful therapy is human love. Oh, beautiful. This Carl Rogers one speaks to that sort of judgment piece. When you criticize me, I intuitively dig in to defend myself. However, when you accept me like I am, I suddenly am willing to change. Non-judgment is always a really big piece of therapeutic relationships. It can be hard to achieve, but it really, when you're work on not judging other people, it works on you too, right? Like I can be so much kinder to myself when I'm kinder to other people. It's easier for me to access being kind to other people than to myself, but because I can do it out there, I can do it in here. So again, to be that amazing trauma-informed provider, non-judgmental attitude, believing that the kids can do well, that they have potential, attending to their feelings. This poster, a friend of mine sent me this meme, and I was like, wow, that's really powerful. And the friend who sent me was a Black man, so it had extra power because I knew that it spoke to his soul. Perhaps if tearful little boys were comforted instead of shamed, there wouldn't be so many angry men struggling to empathize with emotions, right? Ooh. just being genuine and authentic yourself. One of the things that I do love about relational work, like teaching and therapy and music therapy, all of these things is you're the tool. Like you're what is like no one can do it like you can. It's never going to be the same. And like you have your like that's what's great about it. We're all bring ourselves to it. It's amazing. And you get to be yourself. You don't have to do it the same way as everybody else. You're not making widgets. You're in relationship. Communicating empathy and remembering that these kids, that cereal prize, that it's also like the shame backpack, because it's kind of with you a lot of the time if you've experienced trauma. And knowing that will help us help the kids. Another Brene about shame, I think is so, I return to this is one of my go-tos because it's just so what this all is about. So true. If you put shame in a petri dish, it needs 3 things to grow exponentially: secrecy, silence, and judgment. If you put the same amount of shame in a petri dish and douse it with empathy, it can't survive, right? When we're teaching people that they can't talk about the scary things or that they're going to be judged, this of the stigma of our world, that's making things worse. That's not what we want. Oh, whoops, I forget. I'm like, oh, look at me with my cute things. And I kind of have said it throughout, but just to bring it really crystal clear, the skill of managing kids' behaviors is your attention. It's 100% your attention. Human attention is a basic human need. It's completely one of my pet peeves when somebody says like, they're just doing this for attention. Like, yeah, they are. Give them attention. Attention. Kids die without attention. Failure to thrive. Like it's really could be lethal to not pay attention. Yet we act like it's, oh, they just want an extra piece of ice, an extra piece of cake. No, it's a basic need. Attention. And because it's a basic need, we, as well as kids, will do whatever it takes to get it, right? All of us, without exception, would prefer positive attention. All of us would love to be seen for something good we're doing, something helpful, something beautiful, something good about us. But if that's not coming, negative attention is better than no attention by a lot. And negative attention is pretty easy to come by in a lot of environments. And this is literally what I did when I was behavior manager. I would just pay attention to the kids that were doing the good things and completely ignore the disruptive kids. I promise you that stuff worked 100% of the time. This legitimately is science. It doesn't always work super fast, and you have to endure some drama to make it work. But once the kids get the message that you're paying attention to the good things, they start doing the good things, right? Like it's mind-blowing how well it works. Whatever you're putting your attention on, you're giving the power to. If you're putting attention on the kid who's being a pain or who's acting out, not only are you feeding that, you're also showing the other kids that here's how you're going to get attention. Here's how Amy will see you. Knock the chair over. You'll get her attention. It's the most powerful thing you can do is giving attention. And of course, it's completely free. Even better. It's like air and water. Well, water is not free anymore. Once was. The things that you ignore do go away. The problem is they go away after an extinction burst. And what that is so, you know what? I'm just going to let the dog in for one more second, and then I will talk extinction burst. Take a stretch.
I'm sorry about this, but animals and pets, they come to us in different ways and at the most.
They don't always show up the way you want them to, when you want them to. You just got to go with it.
That's right.
So like Extinction Burst, you can always see this in action at the checkout line in the grocery store, right? So what happens is grocery stores very strategically put all that candy at the thing, because they know the kids are sitting in the carts or standing there looking at all the candy. And so what happens? Mom, can I have the candy bar? No, you can't have the candy bar. Mom, please, can I have the candy bar? No. Mom, I want the candy bar. Fine. Boom. What I taught the kid was you have to go up this much to get what you want, right? And it's really hard as they go up to not pay attention to that. And that's what they count on. But that's what you got to do, right? I screwed that up once and then I had to fix it 3 more times after my kid. Like I was pretty good. My kid believed me when I said no, right? But then one time I slipped up, he pushed it and I gave in. And then I had to reset that a couple more, like the next 3 times. So just know, like, it can feel like it's not working. It's working. It works. It works. But like it really works. It's the most effective tool in your toolbox, attention. The other super thing, and I've said it before, and I just want to reiterate, is the best you possible is what we want. Taking care of yourself is good for the kids. Taking care, like, and we want that for you. I put this other like this cartoon picture here because again, it is what we're up against. It's what we're doing. It's why we're doing this work. Kids are walking around with this like trauma on their back at baseline. And then when you throw more things at it, they lose it. The minor inconvenience turns into, wow, the straw, right? Oh, I worked at the Department of Mental Health for a while, and that was what I saw more than anything else was the people that I worked with, their baseline stress level was so high that a small thing would send them into absolute, like they might need to go into the hospital when their phone got shut off because their baseline was so high that you could not add one more thing. And so we're, you know, sort of the more we're kind of giving kids calm opportunities, music, art, love, stories, feeling cared about, like that decreases their overall stress. They can handle more stuff, right? We don't want them to be that, the little character there, like losing it with the minor inconvenience and then being told like you're overreacting, because that's awful too, right? The invalidation that we get for all these things we're carrying, all this stuff, and then people just like, what's so bad? Ugh. They love to invalidate it. I don't know why, but they do. Thich Nhat Hanh quote, when another person makes you suffer, it's because he suffers deeply within himself and his suffering is spilling over. He doesn't need punishment. He needs help, right? I've gotten that lesson again and again and again. It's hard. I still sometimes don't see it, don't get it right away, but I usually find out when someone has harmed me, it's usually they're in much worse shape than me. Like they're really, that wasn't about, like, they were not doing good. So just know that if negativity is coming at you, or kids are not like their behavior is annoying, or that's not you. It's hard to not take things personally when they're happening to you, but they're not personal. When kids are not doing well, not getting their needs met, that's when they're naughty. Engaging in your own healing is really, really one of the best things too. For me, you know, I think I said before, like I thought I was that one magical unicorn that could come out of, you know, abuse and neglect unscathed. Like, no, that's not, I'm not a magical unicorn. Sorry. And so it was, you know, hard to recognize that, but since I have recognized that and engaged in my own healing work, I see positive results. It is worth it to do the work of sort of taking care of yourself, unpacking sort of a lot of the messed up messages we've gotten about health and our feelings and our importance. And doing, keeping our stress as low as we can, where we don't always have control over things. But if you're just constantly feeling like everything's really stressful, then that's not a way to live. That's taking years off your life. We want better for you. And sometimes it's not always possible, but if it is, do what you can to reduce your stress level. Physical health and mental health really do go hand in hand a lot of the time. If you can get yourself if you can attend to your physical health needs, it's going to be better for your mental health and vice versa. Sleep is like the most important and underestimated factor, I find. The more I learn about it, like I've done some kind of deep dives in learning about sleep and what's happening in sleep. And I think like things like a lot of repair work happens mentally in sleep. I watched this sleep specialist who said like, it's not time heals all wounds, it's sleep heals all wounds. And I was like, wow, that's probably true. That makes some sense, right? So just making sure you get sleep for yourself, nap time. It's not just for the kids, but it's important. And a lot of times if kids are living in chaotic environments, like what the amount of letting your guard down it takes to go to sleep is a lot. If we give them a minute to sleep, if they feel safe enough to sleep, that's great. And that being in this moment thing, in this moment, everything's fine. I'm on a Zoom having a good time and the dog is quiet. All right. Keep learning. This is the QR code for my website. I know that sounds self-promoting, but I'm not even selling anything. I have been doing this series that I call Trauma Training Tuesday since the pandemic started. I started it right when the pandemic, actually I started it before the pandemic, but I started doing it on Zoom when the pandemic hit. And what it is a deep dive on a specific trauma experience from both the perspective of what does the research say, what does science say, and what do people who've lived with the experience say. And so that's what I found is really different than, just taking a class on it. And the topics, we had one today, and today's topic was hoarding. And boy, I like that. I learned so much. It brought up so much for me. But if you check it out, it's a good way to really, the intent is to help you see that how you're responding, how you're feeling, if you've had that trauma is completely normal. Like this is science. It's predictable. If you go through a tornado, we can predict that there's going to be certain things that trigger anxiety in you now, right? It really is that clear. We just don't often see it. So if you are so inclined, you can see the list of all the different things and just learn more. There's quite a few on early childhood with experts in it. And I also try to, if there's a good resource, like a good handout or an article, I try to attach that all too, so that it really can be this one stop for resources about this experience. So whether it's immigration, police interactions, suicide, disability, there's over 100 hours of stuff. So I love when people can take advantage of that. And it's important to just, learn as much as you can about this stuff. This is another thing that I feel like has been super helpful for me. Is when you're a trauma therapist and you're spending all your time thinking about trauma and talking about trauma and with people who've experienced trauma, you got to work sometimes for the good and to feel like to keep yourself like, why do I do this work? What's good about it? What's helpful? And so this idea of glimmers is the thing that's been helping me lately. And glimmers are the opposite of triggers. You can see this little meme I found. And the idea of a trigger is something you observe or see or witness or smell that takes you back to something traumatic or scary, right? Like, or to anything. I know that there's probably, I could play a song from the 90s and many of you would go right back to the 90s in your mind and you'd think about a time you heard that song, right? That's what triggers do. They just unexpectedly bring us back into something else. So if the glimmers are the opposite, it's like a moment, a glimpse of something, a smell, a sight, a look that brings us to a moment of happy, brings us tiny moments of awe, right? Like a synchronicity, something beautiful. They spark joy and evoke inner calm. A lot of times, I look like if I'm feeling super like, oh, everything's awful, I'll look at the clock and it's like 11:11 or 2:22. And I feel like those are little glimmers. Like it's okay. Like it makes me feel for a minute like it's not that bad. I'm okay. Everything's okay. They have a positive effect on our mental health. And they really can, they really do the same things triggers do on the other side. These little micro moments that can cause a tiny mood shift. They send cues of safety to our nervous system. They bring feelings of ease and contentment. Our body responds with positive energy. They allow us to feel hope when we're feeling lost. Our nervous system is strengthened by them. They can help increase our well-being. Once we start embracing them, it can become a beautiful way to see the world around you, right? I think like the other thing that I'm very aware of is with the current environment, like the world isn't going to get better real soon. I just don't see that practically happening. So we got to just get better at being okay ourselves, right? So embracing anything you find that just helps you feel better about the world around you is really good. This link on the bottom here is the link to that article about glimmers that really went a little bit deeper on it. And Joe, I'll send you the slide deck when I send you the recording. So if people wanted to grab some links or
Sounds
pictures.
good. Mhm.
And doing this work, taking care of you and doing this stuff for the kids, I hope that you feel it. Like this is the most important work. And you really are helping humanity by taking good care of the kids, giving the kids role models of caring and kindness, and help creating these beautiful spaces for them where they can express themselves with music and art, and this is such a beautiful opportunity. And you might not see it right now, but it really, really does make a difference. It makes a difference, 18 years down the line, 10 years down the line, but please know that it really does make a difference. And you make a difference. Like that's the kind of thing that really helps me. I feel like, okay, I went through some bad stuff, but if I can use it to be helpful, wow, that makes me feel so much better, right? When you do this work, I feel like this is a calling. This is spiritual work. I feel like this is like, it has spiritual rewards. Like I know that it's important work, and I hope that you feel that too, working with kids, that you can see that it matters. Like when you're doing work with a purpose, that's really good for your own mental health. Like, and this is work with a purpose. The interventions that you do with individual kids can have dramatic lifelong impact and can change the whole course of their life trajectory, right? Like I have kids that I worked with 30 years ago that have come back and told me, right? Joanne, I bet you have too. Like this
Yes.
really matters. If you're young and you haven't had this yet, you will, I promise. It really matters. We ourselves can feel like what we're doing is just a drop in the ocean, but the ocean would be less because of that missing drop Mother Teresa.
Oh,
Mother T. And it like the karma idea, like you are doing something really good and really important and valuable for humankind. And hopefully that keeps coming back to you as good stuff for you because you deserve it. This is real. This is really important work. This is also the prevention work. This is, you are saving years of therapy. If we do a good job, this is like decades of misery to future partners that you're saving, decades of therapy. It is easier to build strong children than repair broken men. Broken men do a lot of harm along the way. Building strong children, huge. That is why we're funded to talk about this stuff in early childhood. It's the best return on our investment. Nobody else is better positioned to do something good with this information about brain development and what's important for kids. As we said, like this is planting seeds. You don't see the fruits of your labor right away, but they will manifest. It really, really does matter. Building these strong foundations. Your work is going to matter to people you'll never meet, right? Like the future children of these children are served because of the good work you did. So I just want to, hopefully I met that goal of helping you see how important this work is, and how much I appreciate that you are making the world better with the work that you do. Very, very much appreciated. And that's it. This is, I do, if possible, would like to get this, there's this QR code and this website that's a Google form for DPH. That's who funds me. So if you're up for that, that would be great. I could probably also put that in the chat, and I will stop the share, see how we're doing, see if everybody's still alive. I went through a lot of heavy stuff real fast. I didn't necessarily get to see people's faces. So yeah, would love comments, questions, thoughts. I didn't leave too much time, but 6 minutes, not too bad. Better than I normally do. How you guys doing?
how is everybody?
Good.
Good. Any reactions? Any comments?
For me, it was the first time, and it was very inspiring for me. I loved it, and I want to be part. Like, if you have any other trainings, I would love to be part of that.
Okay. Jonah, is it Jonah? Jonah, send me your email address.
Okay, I will
so
send
that
it
I'll
to you.
know how to contact you, and I'll give it to Amy too.
There's some great ones on the website too. The Trauma Training Center, Latina Costavo. She's like national famous now. She did 4 hours of training for me, and I feel like, oh my gosh, she was like on the Today Show, and like, so
Wow.
we have some high level trainers that came to talk about this, and her stuff was great.
Yeah. Anybody else? I guess I'm going to say, Amy, I love you. Thank you so much for what you have brought to us tonight. It makes me want to cry.
Oh, I love you too. And I'm so glad, like this really does, I hope it comes across, like it means a lot to me to get to do this, because I know how much this matters to kids, and I know how much you're treated like you don't matter in the world, and that is so wrong. Like this, and people are starting to get it. Like they really are starting to see, because you can't argue with the science. We didn't know in the past how much this mattered. My parents, probably all your parents, grew up with if they, you know, they're not going to remember it, it doesn't matter. Like, nope. That's not the truth. Like they might not remember it, but it's building their whole foundation.
Exactly.
Then they're trying to figure out, like, why am I such a mess? I don't, right? Like it is great that we can like do things differently than was done for us. And
Right.
I do hope we come in a short amount of time to valuing the relational, the importance of this relational work that we do.
Yeah, and that's what we keep telling everybody all the time. It starts with your relationships. You have to be able to talk with children, listen to children, not talk at, but talk to and engage and listen to them so that you'll try and get a feeling for what they are trying to say to you. A lot of times they will plainly say to you what they want for help, but we're not hearing it. So we really need to listen to them. Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah. And I will make sure, again, I left my email in the chat. If you want a certificate of attendance from Amy, I will get it to you. You just put in the subject matter, Amy's training. So I'll go right to it instead of skipping over it, because I don't know who you are. So put
And
that
Joanne,
in
I'll
there.
send you a link to the recording, and I'll just keep it. It has to be YouTube, but it'll be unlisted, so only people with the link can see it. So you can just share it
Okay.
in your.
And yeah,
Yeah.
sounds great.
Thanks again. Thank you all.
Thank
so
you.
much. 2 minutes left. Enjoy that 2 minutes that I'm giving you. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and you are appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you.
day.